Okay, so I recorded this demonstration outside, and I was having some trouble with the camera. So you can see that in the beginning there's pretty bad reflections. So it was even worse during the drawing. So basically I just laid in the drawing in the biggest way I could, and now I've started my color. And I used my charcoal to put in where the darks were going to be. And that works fine as long as you're not working on white paper. When you work on white paper, that can be a real problem, that it's hard to cover up the charcoal. And I'm using the soft Willow charcoal, and the brand that I prefer is Coates, which is Coates. And I use that because I can easily just wipe it off with my fingers. I don't need to use an eraser or a chamois, neither of which work particularly well on this Pastel Premier sanded paper. So the problem with this demonstration also is that what you're looking at is the photograph I took of the scene, and I'm actually looking at the real scene, so I can see much more of what's going on out there, much more contrast, more colors than you can see in the photograph. This is really why I much prefer to paint from real life instead of from photographs, because there's just so much more to see when you're out there. And photographs, you know, they flatten things, they make the darks all the same all the way back. You don't see the sense of depth in a photograph that you can when you're really out there. Although clearly I haven't totally got this figured out for filming outside, since I keep getting my head in the way. And I also learned that I should wear a black hat because that hat is too bright. So water especially, I like to start it all really dark and then build up to the lights, and that way you get the sense, I hope, that the water has a depth to it and a thickness. Oops, dropped it. And I'm just really trying to start with as few colors as I can, just make it as simple as possible, because, you know, it's really hard, and the more you can simplify it, the better chance you have of, the better chance you have. Keep it simple in the beginning, get a big statement, and then from there I start breaking it down into smaller changes. But the smaller changes always have to stay within the context of the large masses that I started with. So when I was showing this demonstration in class, a lot of people were asking me things like, well, are you really going to leave like that? And like things that they didn't think looked good, I guess. And the answer really is nothing is written in stone until the painting is finished. So some things might seem like I'm going to make them have more prominence at different points during the painting, but it's all just like it's a process. So things, like I say, nothing, it's just until it's done. It's not done until it's done. And even then, probably if I really came back and worked on it a second time, although I'm not going to on this one, like I say, it's not actually done until it's in the frame. And even then, there might be things that I wish I had done differently. It really pays to spend some time, let your painting sit for a while, and then go back and look at it and make final decisions. But I usually don't. I mean, in these pastels that I do outside, it's just like, this is it. It's one or two times, and then I'm done. So on a bright sunny day like this, one of the most important things is to get enough value contrast. So you see I'm just coming back and making my darks darker. And I guess I must have decided I didn't have enough richness in my sky. So really my favorite lighting is this backlighting situation, which is also what made it hard for the filming to be perfect. But it does get better because the sun goes behind some trees that are in front of me. But you can see why I really have to wear a hat, because I'm looking into the sun. I really like the drama of backlighting. And I'm sort of addicted to it. And once, like, I just don't want to. Other lighting looks kind of boring to me. I mean, a nice side light is also okay, especially for buildings, because it's so much easier to do buildings if you have a light side and a shadow side. But the thing I really don't particularly like to paint is where the light is behind you. So it's such a flat lighting situation. If you're lined up with the light. So a side light or a backlight is what I always prefer for the drama. But like if you're an artist like, say, if you're an artist like Renoir, he did all those portraits of kids and young women and stuff, and he almost always used that front lighting, that flat light, because when you're just trying to make people look younger and kind of prettier, then you don't want a side light. You want just a flat light. And then if you compare that to an artist like Rembrandt, who was more interested in drama and character than Renoir apparently was. So he used that high left coming in side light to make a lot of drama and contrast. And then that shows up every wrinkle on people's faces and all the flaws and imperfections. But like I say, he seemed to be much more interested in character than beauty. So the lighting that you pick depends on the story you're trying to tell. So we talk a lot about in class about how to paint looser. And I'll tell you, one way to loosen up is to actually paint outdoors, because you have to paint kind of like a fiend. You have to hurry. You know, it's fleeting. There's no time to just like worry. And another thing we talked about is the possibility of painting bigger, and maybe even doing something like on newsprint or inexpensive paper, so that you don't have that anxiety, or maybe you guys don't, but I sometimes have anxiety about how much my paper costs. And maybe, oh yes, okay, now I sprayed it. And you can see how much darker it is. And then I'm going to come back with the sky, and because I want to come back and bring up the lights. So I'm starting with the lightest light and bringing it up. The great thing about spraying is that it remasses the painting, which means that it, you know, it kind of knocks it back down. So if you've gotten carried away and things have fallen apart some, it's going to bring it back to the more of a beginning stage, which is one reason why it's so important to keep it even, how much you're finishing, so you don't finish one thing so much that then when you spray it, it gets knocked way back, just like all the other things. So I do try to work all over the painting the whole time as I'm going, and then when I get closer to the end, I might not work on everything, but if you spray it, you have to work on the whole thing again. For one thing, the surface will look different if you don't. And so that's the thing. If you're going to spray like I do, I sprayed it very heavily, then you've got to be sure that you're willing to work on the whole thing again. And if you get to a point where you're not really willing to do that, then don't spray it again. But anyway, back to how to paint looser is paint bigger maybe, and use bigger pieces of your pastel. You can see so far I'm just working with the flat side of my pastel. And I mostly have them broken into pieces that are between 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch long. That's what I think is perfect. I always unwrap my sticks and break them. With the exception of some of the more expensive pastels, like the Senneliers. It's better not to unwrap those, except just a tiny bit. But those, I hardly use my real expensive pastels anymore now that I work on this Pastel Premier paper. Yes, the cough is not gone yet. Who knows what I'm doing behind that hat? Oh yeah, putting this little light on the top of the culvert there, but that turned out to be a bad idea. So think of that more as just a little drawing line, a placeholder, but that definitely goes away. And it looks like I've got the charcoal right now. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's a pastel. Yeah, it's a pastel. You can always redraw with your charcoal, and a lot of times I'll use my charcoal to put in things like, I think when I put in the fence up here and some of this tree limbs, I'm going to use the charcoal, because if I get that in the wrong place, it's easy to get rid of it. So right now I've got the charcoal just to place in where I want those tree trunks. And I drew that fence in with the charcoal too. And sometimes I've talked about how there's not too much purple on a sunny day, but I don't know, in the fall, sure seems like there's a lot of purple in those shadows. So that's the thing, you don't want to make rules. You just want to try to see what you see and not let what you know distract you from what you're actually looking at. And then rules or suggestions, they're helpful when you're having trouble. So like if you can't make it look like a sunny day, then maybe you have too many lavenders in your light areas. Or maybe you don't have enough contrast. So knowing a little bit of things like that, that sunny days have more contrast, and that because you have the two light sources, the sky and the sun, you have sort of a yellowy, bluish contrast. But it's just not always true. So that's why looking is what you're doing. And the great thing about just looking is, like, if you were trying to learn all the rules for how the world works, like how would you, that would take forever. That's why it's so hard to be a more of an academic painter. And that's also why that kind of painting relies so much on drawing. But to be an impressionist is to look and see what you see and just react to that, and really trying to have no memory. And the longer you paint, of course, the harder it is to have no memory. Although actually somewhat it's getting easier now. So yeah. That's the fun of it to me. It's just there you are, reacting to what's happening, not thinking about what you know, not thinking at all. That's actually the real fun of it, is the no thinking part. So now that I had the water dark and I have sprayed it, I can come back in and start putting those lights on top and just hopefully make them look like they're floating on the surface of the water. I also don't think the real painting is quite so running downhill to the right. I think that's just the way the camera is oriented there. Hopefully it's not running downhill so much. If it was, it would need to be straightened for sure. And last night somebody was wondering why I was putting that brown in there. And who knows, really? I just maybe wanted to warm it up a little bit in the water, or maybe I just had it in my hand. Who knows why I do it? Oh, do I have the charcoal again? Looks like I do, trying to get that edge where it belongs. It's hard for me to do two things at once. So to draw and think about color is a little bit harder, whereas it's just easier for me to separate drawing and painting all the time. So when I need to redraw, usually I will come back with the charcoal. It's so funny for me to watch myself paint and see that I do that little flip with my hand all the time. After I go across with the color, I sort of flip my hand up, and I guess that's to see, so I can see what I did. I think I'd just take this chance to give a real shout out to my first art teacher, Martha Eagle. Like, I owe her my whole life. If it wasn't for her, I never would have been an artist. It was kind of an uphill battle in my family. It was not, something that was considered a really much of a worthwhile thing to do. I guess music had a lot more value than art, but so she lived in my neighborhood, and her son, who's still a friend of mine, was a friend of my brother's at that time. And I went over to her house, and when she opened the front door, I saw this painting she'd done of a horse was hanging in the hallway right behind the front door, and it was like, oh my gosh, I just have to be able to do this. And then so I just begged and begged for art lessons. I found out that she taught a couple of kids, and my grandmother gave them to me for Christmas, I think the year I was 13, and my first paint box and all my paints. And I'll tell you what, that was it. That's what gave me my whole life, was her. And then my next two teachers, Richard and Edith Getz, the same thing. Like, I can't even imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't had them. People in my family wanted me to study with some other artist who was, like, I think he went to my church maybe or something. And my teacher, Martha, just insisted that no, I had to go study with Dick and Edith, because they were the best. And they are what gave me the dream to go to New York City and go to the Art Students League. And if I hadn't had them, I just can't even imagine what would my life have been like to not have this art in my life, my whole life like this. You don't know, but I was watching the Antique Roadshow last night, and there were a lot of paintings, and some of them were just really, really, really good, and some were not as good, but it was just incredible to see how the value of them went up and down, because I think it was 2007 is when the show was from, and then they told up or down as of 2022, and it really made me realize that the money you get for your paintings it's not the measure of your success. There's so much to do with fashion. Or like there was a painting by Peter Moran, who was Thomas Moran's younger brother. And because it's not Thomas Moran, if it was Thomas Moran, it'd be worth like millions. But because it's the younger brother, it's only worth 25,000. But yet it was a beautiful painting. No reason. It was just as good as his older brothers, I would say. And then that was in 2007. It was worth 25,000, but it was a painting of cows out in a field, so that's not popular now. So it had gone down, quite a bit to like $12,000. So you just have to paint what you want. That's the real takeaway always. Do what you want, and if it's good enough and the price is right, somebody will buy it. Like. So maybe if any of you ever come to visit me, this is an incredible bike path that goes for miles and miles on the east side of Narragansett Bay. And it's really nice because it's flat. And I met some people from Vermont on it one day when I was out painting, and they just were loving it because it was so flat. So I didn't tell them that they were about to come to the biggest hill on the whole place, which is not much of a hill really compared to what we're used to. Okay, so I sprayed it again. And you can see how dark it is. And again, I'm going to come back and start on the sky. So another thing I do is the amount of pressure I'm using. So like right now I'm using much less pressure. So it's just sort of skimming over the top. Fixative does that too. It makes sort of a bumpier texture actually, so that you can do that kind of dry brush effect. So I painted so much water in this year that I've lived in Rhode Island, And today, when I was painting in my studio earlier today, for a moment, well, of course, this is always a dangerous thing to think, but I was thinking, wow, I'm starting to really get water. But, when last time I said something like that to myself was about grass. And that was it. Then grass suddenly became the hardest thing in my life. So that's probably what's going to happen next. But you would kind of hope if you spent so much time looking at water, you'd get better at painting water. And you can see now it's just a really delicate touch, not like wailing away at it like I was before. I don't want to cover up everything that's underneath. I just want to add to the tops of it. And these are some of those more expensive pastels, like Great Americans or something. The oranges in Rembrandt are just terrible. There's only one really good one, and it usually crumbles to dust when you use it. So it does help for these fall colors to have the yellows and I have the yellow Great American and the orange. Yeah, so this is something that happened after the photograph was taken, where the light started coming through those trees right there. And so that's the kind of thing when you're outdoors painting, something happens that you kind of piques your interest, or you think, wow, I'll try that. And so then you can add that because it's changing. So it's a much more dynamic process there. And now I guess I'm not sure if I'm drawing with charcoal. I guess I am. That would have been good if I did what I said I do. But when I start doing that, I think maybe that's not charcoal. No, it must be a dark green. And then the other thing is, you can try adding these things as it changes, and if it doesn't work out, you just take them out. Especially the sky, like that's the kind of thing that the sky can change so much during the time you're painting, and if something better comes along, I say grab it. A landscape is, we also talked about how do you get better at making your strokes and stuff. So landscape is the great place to practice strokes because there is so much texture, so you're not having to make it up. Like in a still life, your strokes, you're kind of making them up. They're flat. Usually still life objects are just really flat. So flowers, dried flowers, and landscape, those are the ways to really practice texture. And the thing is, like, just kind of go for it. Just try stuff. The more you push yourself, the more you actually do what feels like a failure, the faster you get better. So try not to be afraid. I mean, it's, as we say, it's not bungee jumping. Oops, got out of the lines there. Oh, yeah, and so now I had to spray the water, evidently. That was a good idea because it looks like it was getting away from me. And it's also good to kind of push it till you break it, you know? That it's great to stop when things are like, it's great to stop when you should stop, like when the painting's at its best. But also sometimes it's good to push on. And if it gets wrecked, it's like, so what? You know, you by pushing on is how you get better, not by just doing what you're comfortable with. So, oh, so there's the, I guess I finished, huh? And there's the final thing. It wasn't worked on again after. Okay, thanks so much.